Hello, hello. She'll think that I don't know how. I don't know. I don't know why they do. Hello, good evening. Hello. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Rebecca Novick. I'm the executive director of the Anthony V. Cardona Moot Court program here at Albany Law School, and I am honored to welcome you all to the final round of the Karen C. McGovern Senior Prize Trials tonight. Again, thank you all so much for being here in person, as well as those who are viewing on Zoom. We are so happy to have such a great showing and to be able to feel the excitement in the courtroom tonight. So I know we're all super excited to see our amazing finalists compete tonight. But first, I have some extraordinary people that I have to recognize first. So just as our competitors have put on an amazing show and invested a great deal of time and effort to prepare for this competition, there would be no competition without the dedication of the Senior Prize Trial Chair, Jacqueline Yoselovich, and Associate Claire Hewitt. These two women have remained steady, dedicated, and resilient through the entirety of this competition. The road to the final round tonight was not the easiest. Jacqueline and Claire have dealt with accommodating COVID concerns, student and judge schedules, and other unforeseen circumstances that none of us could have possibly predicted. Despite these obstacles, they have consistently proven there is nothing they can't handle. And with that, they've somehow remained positive and smiling. From springing into action, writing the exciting problem you'll see come to life tonight, to spending countless late hours at the school ensuring that the competition runs smoothly, to always having a potential solution before even presenting me with the problem. Witnessing those qualities and knowing they were under the incredible guidance of their faculty advisor, Professor Michael Wetmore, I knew this was a team I could trust. As you watch our impressive finalists tonight compete, please become enthralled with the skill, story, and allure of the courtroom. But don't forget the students who made this night possible. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the Senior Prize Trial Faculty Advisor, Professor Michael Wetmore.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Michael Wetmore, the faculty advisor for the Senior Prize Trial competitions. My first year serving in that role. But I'm very passionate and excited to serve in that role because this is it. This is the final battleground of many cases. Cases that can't be decided on emotion, cases that can't be decided by agreement, they come here. And you have two sides to a case that are really coming at odds. And there's a jury who's going to be telling us what the truth is on the same set of facts. And that's what's always been very interesting to me about trials. I had a career as a trial prosecutor. I went to law school wanting to be a trial prosecutor. Funny enough, when I was here, this was the competition that I wanted to do the most. This was the competition I was very eager to do from the first week of 1L orientation. I did do this competition, and the year that I did compete, based on the number of teams in the competition, they were cutting only 2 teams in the preliminary rounds. I was one of those teams. And so I'm very happy to actually be here. And it truly is actually a very special privilege for me to be here tonight. I have the unique honor of actually knowing all of our 4 competitors, either from classes, from competitions, interning in my office, the DA's office. I'm familiar with all 4 of them. I'm familiar with the quality of their work, and I can confidently say that we're all in for a real show tonight. So I want to take a moment and thank a number of people who I think helped make this happen. First, the members of the moot court board. This is a student-run organization, and night after night, after the students have gone to classes, and some manage to do it while they're in classes, they put together competitions without fault, without issue, and they come together with all of the stresses that you can imagine. It's a student-run organization, and they have the awkward tension of organizing competitions involving their peers. And they do a lot of work, and I think it goes unsaid sometimes, the stress that that brings them. So I think we should give them. And then just a couple other areas, the faculty and the administration, always great for resources, catastrophes, solutions, help, rescue in the form of our faculty and administration, whether it's last minute judges, whether it's something's come up and we have a question, they're always here for us and we appreciate them. And then finally, the last group that I think is appropriate to really thank, extend our thanks to, and that's the students. The students who are volunteering for the competition as witnesses, as bailiff, as jurors, and as competitors, because we would not be here without them. So this is going to be very exciting. We're going to have two teams come together. The tools that they'll be using are the law and the facts. The stakes are justice for their cases. And one of the things that we try to foster here more than anything at Albany Law School is learning by doing. And this competition allows for that. It allows for students to hone their trial skills, to exercise their public speaking skills, and to come together, learn the arts of trial advocacy and persuasion. And I think we're really in for a good show. So without further ado, I want to introduce the Senior Prize Trial Chair, Jacqueline Yozelovich, who really helped make this happen.
My handy dandy little notebook. Hi, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Yoselovich, and I am this year's Senior Prize Trials Competition Chair. So on behalf of Albany Law School's Moot Court program, I would like to welcome everybody to the final round of tonight's Karen C. McGovern Senior Prize Trials Competition. This is actually our second year of this competition, in which we are a one semester competition. We used to do 2 semesters, where the fall semester was a civil case and the spring was a criminal case. And we decided to change it to a one semester competition so that we could accommodate the wonderful students that would be graduating early, to accommodate the students that would be doing a semester in practice where they would go to another city and do an internship there, and to accommodate the wonderful students that have the opportunity to do the pro bono scholars program here, where they get to graduate early and take the February bar. So that is why we had changed the competition to be one semester. I want to take a second to share some thank yous to the people that have made this possible. First, as a whole, I would like to thank the entire Moot Court Board. It's because of you that I am standing here today, giving this speech, inviting all of you to be here today and welcome the competitors and join in this moment. So thank you to all of you for that. I have to thank Claire Hewitt, the most wonderful associate any person could ever ask for. Without her, this competition would not be happening. So I give thanks above and beyond to you for all of this. As well to Professor Wetmore. Again, this is what a time to get thrown into this competition this year with us, with the way it has been. But without you, this wouldn't have been as smooth or as wonderful or as enjoyable of a process to be a part of. So thank you for all of what you do. I have to thank the executive director, Rebecca Novick, for all of her time and support. None of this would have worked out without her wisdom and her supporting me throughout this process. as well as to Professor Jo Har. She's the advisor of the moot court program. And without her, we would not have been able to deal with any of the things we had to deal with this year. As well as huge thank yous to Teresa Colbert, Ben Myers, Bill Purcell, everybody in the IT department, communications department. You are what make this night so special. So thank you to all of you. And I hope that you all realize how much we appreciate you and what you do for us. And then I would also like to thank my parents and my sister and my grandmother for all of the support that they have given me in my life. I would not be standing here today without them. So thank you to you guys. I know you're on Zoom watching. Okay, moving on to the finalists tonight. The prosecution tonight, who is sitting over on my left-hand side, closer to the jury, is our prosecution tonight, Robert Hojnacki and Lillian Hahn. They will be representing the people of the state of New Scotland, prosecuting this case tonight. And then also we have on my right side, the side closest to our wonderful bailiff, who represents the defense and the defendant, Dr. Jamie Carlisle tonight. So Deana DiBenedetto and Allison Magnarelli, these teams are fierce competitors, and this is going to be a wonderful evening. So I appreciate you all for being here tonight to support them and support what we do here in the moot court program. This competition is known as the Karen C. McGovern Senior Prize Trials Competition, named after Karen C. McGovern, who was a student here at Albany Law School back in the early 2000s. She would have been a member of the graduating class of 2001, but she had sadly passed away in her second year of law school. But at that graduation in 2001, her mother had the opportunity to go up to the stage and accept the award of the Isabel Redmond Award, which recognized Karen's courage, her perseverance, and her grace when confronting extraordinary challenges. And if you want to learn anything more about her, we have programs that were given out tonight that has a blurb about who she was and what she stands for and why this program is named after her. So what's tonight's case? You heard from Professor Wetmore that tonight's case is a criminal trial. Tonight's case is the people of the state of New Scotland versus Dr. Jamie Carlisle. Dr. Jamie Carlisle is this scientist who has been working on the miracle drug that would cure cancer for generations to come. The only problem is that drug has not yet been approved by the FDA. That's where Joe Eagle comes into this. If any of you were here last year, you may recognize the name Joe Eagle as the big cat lover of Tigertown. So Joe Eagle had sadly been diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer, at which point he was seeing an oncologist and somehow ended up on a list of potential candidates for Dr. Carlisle's human trials if the FDA approved it. Joe Eagle came into Star Labs, where Dr. Carlisle works, and ended up having to be inoculated with the shingles vaccine because he hadn't yet had it. Dr. Carlisle went to their lab, took out the vaccine, put it in the vial, and inoculated Joe Eagle. And several days later, Joe Eagle passed away. The only problem, the shingles vaccine was nowhere to be found in his blood. There was only an unknown chemical compound, potentially the miracle drug that Dr. Carlisle has been working on and does not yet have FDA approval for. And the people tonight have the burden to prove that Dr. Carlisle is guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. And that's what you will get to see tonight. So now moving on to who will actually be helping us get through this case tonight, the presiding judge. The judge tonight is the Honorable Daniel J. Stewart. Judge Stewart is, he is for the United States Magistrate Judge for the Northern District of New York. He was appointed in 2015 to this position. Judge Stewart is a native to Warren County. He received his bachelor's degree from University of Notre Dame in 1985, and then he received his JD from Albany Law School in 1988. After graduating from law school, he went on to be a trial attorney as well as partner at the law firm Dreyer Boyajian LLP for 15 years before he moved to Brennan and White LLP in Queensbury, New York for 10 years before he was appointed to this position in 2015. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. Thank you to the competitors for making this competition worthwhile and for being amazing. And I hope you all enjoy. So I would like to get tonight's competition started. Guys.
Right, we're here in the case of the state of New York versus Jamie Carlisle. The record can reflect that the defendant is here with counsel. The prosecution is represented. We have a jury in place. Why don't I have counsel make their appearances for the record, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Robert Hojnacki for the prosecution.
And Lillian Hahn for the prosecution.
All right, good evening, both of you.
Good evening, Your Honor. Allison Magnarelli for the defense. Good evening, Your Honor. Deana DiBenedetto for the defense.
All right, good evening to both of you. All right, do we have any motions that we want to address before we proceed with opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor. We have a few housekeeping matters that we would like to address before we begin today.
All right, let me do so.
To begin, we would just like to confirm if counsel has any exhibits, may we publish inaccurate copies to the jury, or would you like us to work with only one copy this evening?
What's your position on that?
Our position is that we would like to publish a copy to the jury after it's been admitted into evidence. That way the jury is able to review the evidence along with the witness during testimony.
All right, I have no objection to that, but just as a courtesy to the jury, give them an opportunity to review the exhibit before you ask questions, because I find it's difficult to listen to the question while you're simultaneously being asked to look at an exhibit, all right?
Yes, of course, Your Honor.
All right, what's next?
Additionally, we would just like to note on the record that there were a series of pretrial stipulations contained on pages 16 and 17 of the record. That was where the people in the defense stipulated to several things pertaining to the accuracy of exhibits. I have a copy of that with me as well, if Your Honor would so need one, but we would just like to note those on the record before we begin today's proceeding.
All right, any dispute as to that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I note that the autopsy report is stipulated as admissible, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Next,
Your Honor, you would ask that all objections to opening and closing statements be reserved to the close of those statements.
any response to that?
The people are okay with that, Your Honor.
All right, yeah, I wouldn't expect too many interruptions in an opening or closing statement unless it's something very egregious, all right?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
We would also ask that all witnesses for the trial this evening, with the exception of the defendant tonight, be constructively sequestered.
Okay, does the government object to that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that's granted.
Thank you. That's all.
Anything for the government?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to ask your preference as far as approaching opposing counsel, the witness bench, and publishing items to the jury. Would you like us to ask for permission in all three scenarios, even with a friendly witness? Or do we not have to ask to approach for a friendly witness, only hostile?
I have no objection. Obviously, if you have an exhibit, make sure you show it to your opposing counsel before you publish it to the jury. There's a proper foundation and you can approach the witness. I don't see a problem with it. Just I get nauseous, so don't move around too much. All right, stay behind the microphone.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right,
Your Honor, we do have one more motion in limine.
okay.
We would like to move and eliminate to exclude from this trial any mention of a prior incident involving Star Labs, that they had a drug that never went through the full complete FDA approval, as we believe that it is the probative value is substantially outweighed by the risk of unfair prejudice for two reasons. One being that all the information that we have are only mentioned in 2 points in the record, and this incident is only pertaining to Star Labs. We have no evidence that it is actually relevant at all to Dr. Jamie Carlisle herself. And we believe that because this is the only information that we have, that it would be unfair to the jury and it would confuse them on whether or not that just because this happened in the past that this is the case here today.
Well, it's unclear to me what the relevance of it would be until I find out when it's being offered. So I'll reserve on that request.
Thank
As
you.
far as objections go, please make your objections direct and to the point. Don't linger, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Would the government wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may do so.
Evening, members of the jury, Your Honor, and opposing counsel. And may it please the court. On July 30th of 2022, Dr. Jamie Carlisle proved that she has ambition that kills. And who paid the price for this ambition? It was Joe Eagle. On July 30th of 2022, Dr. Jamie Carlisle injected Joe Eagle with a shot of Okama 5, an unimproved FDA drug that she had been working on for 4 years prior. She wanted to see the side effects of this drug before it had proper FDA approval. She wanted to go ahead with the human trials before hearing back from the FDA. Now, unfortunately for Joe Eagle, this drug was no miracle. It led to a severe blood clot in his brain, which led to a stroke and his untimely death. Now, how did this happen? How is this possible? Today, myself and my co-counsel Lillian Hahn will stand before you and not prove how terrible of a person Dr. Carlisle is, not how unprofessional she is, but rather she was a professional that let her ambition get the best of her. And Joe Eagle paid the price for that ambition. So who is Joe Eagle? Joe Eagle is our victim in today's case. He is a 50-year-old man who was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. He was under the long-term treatment of Dr. Taylor Strike, who you will hear from today. Now, Dr. Strike will testify that Joe Eagle was doing good. His health was improving. The recent tests showed no signs of blood clotting. Dr. Taylor Strike and Dr. Jamie Carlisle met together in medical school. When Dr. Jamie Carlisle reached out to Dr. Strike looking for candidates for a potential upcoming human trial, Dr. Strike obliged and gave 4 candidates. Joe Eagle was among those. Joe Eagle got in contact with Dr. Jamie Carlisle and they set up a preliminary examination. Joe Eagle went to Star Labs for his preliminary examination, and 5 days later, he was dead. A preliminary examination, and 5 days later, the victim was dead. How could this be? Dr. Carlisle offered a shingles vaccine to Joe Eagle. He did not receive a shingles vaccine. He received a non-FDA approved drug that ultimately killed him. Now, Dr. Jamie Carlisle is a scientist who has focused her career on genetic research and pharmaceutical developments. Her goal, in her own words, is to find a cure for all inheritable diseases and illnesses. Now, that's a very honorable goal, but unfortunately, she will never be able to see it through because of this mistake she made by switching a vaccine to see the effects of the drug before it had FDA approval. So the people will call 2 witnesses before you today. We will call Dr. Taylor Strike and Sam Waters to demonstrate why and how Dr. Jamie Carlisle switched the vaccines on the day of questioning, July 30th of 2022. Dr. Taylor Strike, you will hear from first. He's an extremely brilliant young man. He was an early admit to medical school, and he was there, and he was Joe Eagle's long-term doctor. You will hear from him how Joe was treated and how his condition was improving. His health was doing better. Recent tests showed no signs of blood clots. And you will hear how shocked Joe's long-term doctor was to hear that Joe had passed away. He was shocked. Next, you will hear from Sam Waters, who is a research assistant at True Genetics. Now, Sam Waters was tasked with going undercover to gain information about Dr. Carlisle's miracle drug, Okama 5. While yes, she was there undercover, she was there as a spy. What's important today is she was there the day in question. She saw what happened. She will get on the stand, swear an oath, and she will testify as to what she saw. She saw Dr. Carlisle go into the refrigerator where she just was moments prior, where she saw Okama 5 in the refrigerator. Sam Waters saw Dr. Carlisle go into that refrigerator, pull a syringe, and exit. Now that testimony, along with the other testimony you will hear, will provide a perfect timeline of what happened. As Dr. Carlisle was in the preliminary examination with Joe Eagle, she left to go get the shingles vaccine. She went into the lab where Sam Waters was, where Sam Waters saw her get the Okama 5 in a single syringe and leave. 5 days later, Joe Eagle was dead. Now, we as a people understand that we have the burden before you today. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dr. Carlisle is guilty of murder in the second degree. In order to do that, we must prove that on or about July 30th of 2022, in the county of Meta, the defendant, Jamie Carlisle, caused the death of Joe Eagles. And two, that she did so by recklessly engaging in conduct which created a grave risk of death to Joe Eagle. And three, that the defendant engaged in such conduct under the circumstances envisaging a depraved indifference for human life. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at the end of the trial, my co-counsel Lillian Hahn will stand before you as I am now. She will run you through the major key parts of today's trial, and we are confident at the end of today's trial, through the hard evidence and the testimony you will hear, that you will find Dr. Jamie Carlisle guilty of murder in the second degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Does the defense wish to make an opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Allison Magnarelli, and it is my pleasure to address you this evening. I, along with my co-counsel, Deana DiBenedetto, represent Dr. Jamie Carlisle. Now, you just heard from the prosecution a story. And sometimes when you tell a story, you shine light on the positive points or what you want the listener to hear. The storyteller controls the narrative. Important points that shed light on the truth may be left out. You heard about the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning we start out presuming that the defendant is innocent. That means that the burden is on the state to prove to you these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the doubt of a fair-minded and impartial juror honestly seeking the truth, not seeking doubt. And over the course of this trial, ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you think to yourself, did what I just hear clarify something that I heard earlier? Or did that fill in the gap? Or did that actually increase my doubt? Did that create more ideas in my head of what happened? We believe the more evidence that you hear and the more witnesses that you hear from will increase your doubt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you now picture a game of Jenga. If you're not familiar with the game, it's a game where you have three little wooden blocks and you stack them on top of each other, side by side. And when you think of each block, think of that as one fact that the prosecution presents. You think of that as one fact the witness said or one fact that the evidence will show. And the prosecution is going to build up their tower with all of those little blocks. Now, if you know Jenga, you have to knock off one of those blocks and find the wobbly part that causes the whole tower to fall down. And that's where the defense comes in. That's where we come in to say, if we take one of those blocks and look at it from a different perspective, look at that fact in a different way, that if we take it out, the whole tower, the whole of the prosecution's case falls down. Now, you heard that the prosecution is going to call some witnesses today. You first heard that the prosecution is going to call Dr. Taylor Strike. And Dr. Taylor Strike was Mr. Joe Eagle's oncologist. That means his cancer doctor. And what you heard from the prosecution is that Joe Eagle was doing good. You heard that Dr. Carlisle inoculated Mr. Eagle with this drug that was unapproved. However, Dr. Strike, as you will hear today, you will hear that there is no evidence that Mr. Eagle was ever in remission of cancer. He was still considered a cancer patient. Further, you will hear that Dr. Taylor Strike was not surprised that Dr. Jamie Carlisle came to him asking for names of potential candidates for the human trials. Correct. There is no point at this time that OCAMA-5, the drug that Dr. Jamie Carlisle was researching, was yet approved for FDA approval. However, as you will hear from Dr. Taylor Strike, he wasn't surprised that Dr. Carlisle came to him asking for potential names. Because as you will hear from Dr. Strike, that was common in this field, to gather up potential candidates, do some research, so you have those potential candidates ready if and when those FDA approvals come in. Further, you will hear that Dr. Strike received informed consent from each of those patients on that list to give up their medical records to Dr. Carlisle in order to have a conversation with her about the potential human trials. Next, the prosecution said that they will call their next witness, Ms. Sam Waters. Ms. Sam Waters was hired as a research assistant at Star Labs, Dr. Jamie Carlisle's employer, and where all of this came to fruition on the date of July 30th. The prosecution stated that Ms. Sam Waters saw what happened. Ms. Sam Waters was in the lab where Dr. Jamie Carlisle received the vial and received the sample to fill the contents of the syringe that was then injected into the arm of Mr. Joe Eagle. However, what if I told you that Ms. Waters wasn't sure which refrigerator she saw Dr. Jamie Carlisle stand in front of? What if I told you that, as you will hear today, Ms. Waters has no idea what the actual contents of that vial was that Dr. Jamie Carlisle pulled out, only that it was orange in color? And as you will also hear today, what else is orange in color? The shingles vaccine. Next, the defense will call two witnesses, first being Dr. Jamie Carlisle herself. You just heard the prosecution say that Dr. Jamie Carlisle wanted to go ahead with the human trials, even though she did not receive FDA approval for Ocama 5 yet. However, that's not accurate. As you will hear today, Dr. Jamie Carlisle only wanted to meet with potential candidates. She was not ready to fully go through with the human trials, just to meet with them, have a conversation with them about what the human trials would look like if and when they ever come to fruition. Finally, the defense will call Ms. Frankie Blaine. Ms. Blaine was Dr. Jamie Carlisle's direct assistant at Star Labs. And you will see, and you will hear today, that Ms. Frankie Blaine was in the room with the meeting with Dr. Jamie Carlisle and Mr. Joe Eagle when Mr. Eagle was inoculated with the vaccine from Dr. Carlisle. And you will hear from her that she observed the contents in the syringe that went into Mr. Eagle's arm was orange in color. Now, does that increase your doubt? What we, the defense, ask you is to keep an open mind throughout this trial. And after closing statements, ask yourself, was there proof? Did you hear proof this evening that Dr. Jamie Carlisle murdered Joe Eagle? We believe you will not hear that proof because it does not exist. At the close of this trial, we, the defense, ask you to find our client, Dr. Jamie Carlisle, not guilty because the burden of proof has not been met. A verdict of guilty would be an injustice. Thank you for your time this evening.
All right, thank you, Counselor. All right, does the government wish to call its first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the people would like to call Dr. Taylor Strike to the stand.
All right, Dr. Drake.
Raise your right hand.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Dr. Strike. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Evening, my name is Taylor Strike.
And how old are you, Dr. Strike?
I'm 49 years old,
Where do you reside?
here in Central City.
And what is your current occupation?
So I am the chief of oncologist at Central City Hospital, and I've been in that role for the past 3 years now. And I happen to be actually the youngest chief of oncology at Central City Hospital they've ever had.
Could you please explain to the jury your educational background?
Yes, so when I was 16 years old, I attended New Scotland University. I graduated at 19 to where I was admitted to the Wetmore School of Medicine to receive a medical degree. I wanted to take a year off, wanted a little break from school. So I traveled around different parts of the world, Tokyo, Sydney, Australia, and I basically helped do research on cell growth biology during that year.
Did you eventually go back to med school?
I did. So after that year, I was ready to go back to school, and I received my medical degree from Wetmore School of Medicine. And after that, I stayed in the area and did my residency as a surgical oncologist at Central City Hospital. And once my residency was done, I decided to accept a fellowship in Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic doing cancer research. Wanted to come back home, so came back home and was an attendant, and now I'm chief of oncology at Central City Hospital.
Dr. Strike, could you please tell the court why you're here today?
Yeah, so I here to testify voluntarily. Joe Eagle was a long-term patient of mine, and it's upsetting that I'm up here. I mean, total shock to hear that he's passed
Objection,
away.
Your Honor. The relevance of his testimony regarding his emotions of why he's here today are not relevant to this proceeding.
Sustained. I'll strike that portion. You can continue.
So
Dr. Strike, why are you here today?
Joe Eagle was a long-term patient of mine. To hear his death was very shocking. He was doing so well with his cancer treatment, so that's why I'm here.
And are you familiar with the defendant, Jamie Carlisle?
I am, yes.
So, Dr. Strike, we will be talking about your relationship with the defendant later on, but first I just want to focus on your relationship with the victim in this case. So you mentioned that you were Joe Eagle's doctor for his cancer treatments, right?
Yes, yes.
What is it like working with cancer patients?
It's very rewarding. It's also, very difficult. I love getting to know them on a personal level.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Your Honor, I just simply asked the witness to explain his role. This case involves a victim that he was treating for a while since his cancer diagnosis.
All right, he can testify as to what he did. As far as, how it affected him, I think that's not necessarily relevant, so you can skip over that.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Joe Eagle, how was Joe doing with his treatments?
He was doing well. So his cancer stopped growing and he had, pretty good health otherwise. There were no signs of any blood clots.
Do you have any recent notes or documentation that supports these findings from recent testing done on Joe Eagle?
I did. I believe on July 21st of this year was my last meeting with him, and I documented notes from our last treatment and meeting together.
And Dr. Strike, would you recognize those notes if I were to show them to you here today?
Yes.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been marked as Exhibit 5 for identification purposes. Now, Dr. Strike, I've just handed you what's been marked as Exhibit 5 for identification. Could you please tell the court what that document is?
Yes. So these are the notes that I took Joe Eagle's last meeting with me, his last patient meeting. It's an adult medical history form with his information and notes from his visit.
Has this medical form been altered, changed, or have there been any deletions made to it since you've last seen it?
No, there has not.
And is that your signature that's on the bottom of the page?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would move Exhibit 5 into evidence.
All right, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that's admitted on consent.
Your Honor, permission to publish a copy to the jury?
Yes, if necessary.
Now, Dr. Strike, how did you hear of Joe Eagle's passing?
So on August 4th, I received a call from my assistant that a body had shown up at Dr. Ramon's office. He's the medical examiner, the chief medical examiner. I didn't really get much information on the phone. I also thought it was odd that I received a call. Usually I don't. Usually standard procedure is I'll come into work in the morning and I'll receive paperwork of bodies that have come into the medical examiner's office and go from there. So it was odd receiving a call. So since I didn't receive much, I decided to pack up, leave the office, head over to the medical examiner's office. And when I got there, I was utterly shocked to see that the body was Joe Eagle. It didn't really make any sense since he was doing well with his treatment, and it didn't add up to me. So since he was a long-term patient of mine, Dr. Ramon allowed me to just be present.
Objection, Your Honor. Narration. We are far beyond where the question began at this point.
That may be true. Why don't you ask the next question, Counselor?
So, Dr. Strike, you testified that you went down to the medical examiner's office. What happened after you discovered that the deceased was your patient, Joe Eagle?
I asked Dr. Ramon if I could be present for the autopsy report, and he allowed me to do so.
Dr. Strike, if I were to show you a copy of this autopsy report, would you recognize it?
Yes,
Your Honor, let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1 for identification purposes. Dr. Strike, the document I've just handed you is what has been previously marked as Exhibit 1. Could you please tell the court what that document is?
yep, this is the autopsy report from Joey.
And how do you recognize this report?
I was present when Dr. Ramon created it.
And it hasn't been altered or changed since you've last seen it?
No, it has not.
Your Honor, at this time and pursuant to stipulation 6, the people would move Exhibit 1 into evidence.
All right, that's admitted on stipulation.
Your Honor, at this time, I will also now publish Exhibit 1 to the jury. Now, Dr. Strike and members of the jury, specifically, I would like to draw your attention to the second page of that autopsy report. Under the toxicology portion, could you please explain the last 3 sentences of that to the court?
So additional tests show the blood contained a combination of chemicals unknown. Medical files do not contain indications of any drugs or combination of drugs being prescribed. Recent file updates show shingles vaccination was administered, but no results of vaccination from blood contents present.
So that last sentence, what does it mean, no results of vaccinations?
Objection, Your Honor. This is a record by Cisco Raymond, and I think that the witness's knowledge is limited to this document presented before him. So explaining something outside of that would be outside the scope of his knowledge.
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly,
Briefly.
as a doctor, Dr. Strike is qualified to answer a simple question about what it means. He was present for the autopsy. He has every bit as much knowledge about this autopsy report as the medical examiner himself, since he was present. I'm simply just asking him a clarifying question for the members of the jury.
All right, well, the document's in evidence. It can be read. I'm going to overrule the objection. He's a doctor. You can cross-examine him on what it may or may not mean.
So, Dr. Strike, what does it mean by no results of vaccinations?
There was no shingles vaccine.
Doctor, can you pull the microphone closer to you? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yes, you want me to repeat what I said?
No, I heard it. But
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to retrieve Exhibits 5 and Exhibit 1 from the witness. Thank you, Dr. Strike. Now, drawing your attention to Dr. Carlisle, how do you know her?
So Dr. Carlisle was, I met her in my first year in med school. She was a student teacher in one of my classes. At the time, we didn't know each other very well, but we reconnected later after I finished residency and my fellowship, and I was back working at Central City Hospital, reconnected professionally, and we'd meet at conferences within the area to talk about, cell biology and cancer research, since we had similar backgrounds. So that's really how we connected.
And Dr. Strike, could you please identify Dr. Carlisle in the courtroom today?
Yes, Dr. Carlisle is sitting next to opposing counsel in the black suit and the white shirt.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that the witness has positively identified the defendant, Jamie Carlisle, in the courtroom today by her jacket and shirt.
all right, the record will so reflect.
Now, Dr. Strike, are you familiar with Star Labs?
Yes, that's where Dr. Carlisle worked,
And do you know where Star Labs is located?
in New Scotland,
The state of New Scotland, right?
the state of New Scotland, yes.
And what city is it in?
It's in Central City,
Is Central City in the county of Meta?
yes.
So just for clarification, Star Labs is located in Central City in the county of Meta in the state of New Scotland.
Objection, Your Honor, leading question.
I'll allow it. He's answered the question. You can move on.
Now, Dr. Strike, based off of your personal observations, how does Dr. Carlisle carry herself within the medical community?
So Dr. Carlisle is a very ambitious doctor, probably one of the most ambitious doctors that I've ever met. As long as I've known Dr. Carlisle, her goal in life and really in her professional career was to create this drug, this cancer curable drug that would basically, save generations to come from inheriting cancers. And there was really nothing that was going to stop her from creating that.
Dr. Strike, could you please explain to the jury your most recent interaction that you had with Dr. Carlisle?
Yes, so I believe it was on July 26th of this year. I was finishing my rounds at the hospital, making my way back to the office. Dr. Carlisle was there in my office. She wanted to discuss basically where Star Labs was at with their cancer research, and specifically this drug, this cancer curable drug that would save lives for the future.
Did Dr. Carlisle discuss with you how far along in the research she was for this new drug?
Yes, so Dr. Carlisle told me that Star Labs had applied for FDA approval to do human trials with this drug. The application process takes a while, and FDA is slow with approving, could take a couple weeks. So Star Labs wanted to get a jump start on finding potential candidates for the human trials, and basically Star Labs wanted to do that. So once they got approval, they'd be a step ahead of before, and they could begin trials faster.
Is it common practice for research labs to take this step before obtaining approval?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of this witness's knowledge, there's been no foundation that he's aware of these procedures.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. You can move on.
So you mentioned finding candidates. Who are these candidates generally?
So, the candidates are, cancer patients here at Central City Hospital. You need a level playing field, candidates of similar health outside of their cancer. So you don't want candidates with, who are tobacco users, who have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and it takes a while to vet the process of finding candidates all on this level playing field. So I can't say I was really surprised that Dr. Carlisle asked to help find potential candidates, especially since Star Labs, had issues with trials.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is about to speak about what was mentioned earlier in our motion in limine regarding the risk of unfair prejudice and propensity evidence. And we would like to renew that objection at this time.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. The people take the position that this is probative evidence far more than it is prejudicial. The jury is the trier of fact in this case. It is up to them to decide whether or not they will consider this evidence. Dr. Strike is simply elaborating on things that he is aware of regarding Star Labs and Dr. Carlisle, as she has been the lead researcher there for the last 22 years. And Dr. Strike is well within his knowledge to state this information.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. I'll allow you to justify it.
Would you like me to restate the question?
Please.
So you were speaking about who these candidates are generally, and later on you started speaking about why Dr. Carlisle came to you. So why did Dr. Carlisle come to you for these candidates?
So as I mentioned previously, process takes a while.
Calls for speculation, asking why Dr. Carlisle came to Dr. Strike.
If he knows.
So it takes a while to vet the process to find, candidates on a level playing field. Like I said, you need to vet ones that have other underlying health issues. So since FDA approval was going to take some time, Dr. Carlisle and Star Labs wanted to start the process of finding these potential candidates. And basically, they wanted to do this, especially since Star Labs has had issues in the past with trials.
Now, Dr. Strike, did you actually recommend any potential candidates to Dr. Carlisle?
I did. I recommended 4 candidates. Joe Eagle was one of my candidates. But before, recommending them, I received consent. Basically, if I could pass along their name and medical information to Dr. Carlisle for potential human trials. And so my assistant sent over an email to Dr. Carlisle with the names of these candidates. Joe Eagle was on that and their medical information. But I wasn't aware that Joe Eagle and Dr. Carlisle were going to meet, so soon after.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions for Dr. Strake.
Okay, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Dr. Strake. My name is Deana DiBenedetto, and I am counsel for the defense in this proceeding. I'm going to be asking you a few questions this evening. To begin, isn't it true that you knew Dr. Jamie Carlisle prior to the filing of this lawsuit?
Yes, I did.
And isn't it true that you had spoken to Dr. Carlisle prior to the filing of this lawsuit?
Yes, we're acquaintances.
And from your conversations with Dr. Carlisle, isn't it true that you knew her biggest goal was to save human lives by curing cancer?
Yes, that's been her goal for her professional career.
And also from your conversations with Dr. Carlisle, isn't it true that you knew that Star Labs was working on the technology to develop a cancer curing drug?
Yes, that's correct.
And from what you understood, the process would first involve Star Labs extracting DNA from a cancerous individual, correct?
Yeah.
And to your knowledge, the first step in this process would not actually be injecting a person with anything, correct?
That is correct.
Now, shifting gears a little bit here, isn't it true that you testified during your direct examination that you had met with Dr. Carlisle on the afternoon of July 26th?
Yes, we met in my office.
And isn't it true that it was during this meeting on the afternoon of July 26th that you learned that after years of research and studies, Star Labs had created a drug that would cure cancer?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, but yeah.
You also learned that Star Labs had submitted their application to the FDA to receive clinical trial approval, correct?
They had submitted their application.
When Dr. Carlisle came to you to express that Star Labs had created a drug that will cure inheritable cancers, isn't it true that you thought that Dr. Carlisle had actually done it?
I mean, I don't know why they would submit for FDA approval if they hadn't.
Is that a yes?
So, yeah, sure.
Now, you testified on direct that Star Labs wanted to get a jump on finding candidates that could potentially qualify for the clinical trials, correct?
Correct.
And isn't it true that this is a not unheard of step for labs to take before receiving approval?
This witness, there's not been proper foundation laid to, that this witness has knowledge of whether or not this is a common practice, for obtaining or before obtaining FDA approval by research labs.
Well, that was a question, so I'm going to overrule your objection. I'll allow the witness to answer.
Would you like me to repeat that question for you?
Please.
Isn't it true that it is not unheard of for labs to find candidates that could potentially qualify for the clinical trials before approval?
That is true.
This is because candidates with high risk cannot be involved in these trials, correct?
Yes.
In fact, finding these candidates makes it much more likely to get into phase 1 of clinical trials within a month of approval, correct?
Yeah, it speeds up the process.
So you weren't surprised then when Dr. Carlisle came to you to ask for a list of potential candidates, correct?
I was not surprised.
And isn't it true that it was at that point that you received consent for approximately 4 of your patients to turn over their information and medical records?
After we spoke, yes, I received consent.
And you had your assistant provide Dr. Carlisle with that list of patients, correct?
Correct.
Because you were willing to help Star Labs hit the ground running, correct?
Yeah, that was correct. Yeah.
Now, you stated on direct that Mr. Eagle was one of the individuals on this list, correct?
Correct.
And in addition to providing Mr. Eagle's name to Star Labs, you also provided his medical records, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you were Mr. Eagle's doctor?
Yes, I was.
And you described his condition on direct as a healthy individual, correct?
He was doing well with his cancer. Yes.
And isn't it true that you also mentioned on direct that his cancer had stopped growing?
Yes.
Dr. Strike, do you still have Exhibit 5 in front of you?
I do not.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Mr. May.
Let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel Exhibit 5, which was previously admitted into evidence by opposing counsel. May I also publish a true and accurate copy to the jury at this time?
I think they have one over there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now, looking at Exhibit 5, it states that these were your notes for Mr. Eagle's visit to Central City Hospital on July 21st, correct?
Correct.
And isn't it true that under your care, Mr. Eagle was undergoing chemoradiation therapies?
Yes, he was.
And isn't it true that according to your notes in Exhibit 5 from Mr. Eagle's visit to Central City Hospital, Mr. Eagle was still presenting a malignant tumor, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And isn't it true that malignant tumors, as compared to benign tumors, grow quickly?
They do.
And isn't it true that as compared to benign tumors, malignant tumors can spread to other parts of the body?
It's true, but it wasn't at the
Thank you.
time.
According to your notes in Exhibit 5,
I would just ask that opposing counsel lets my witness finish his answer fully before interrupting him and moving on to another question.
Well, I'm not sure it was an interruption. Why don't just slow down with your question. Give him a chance to make sure that he's completed his response and just respond directly to the question. All right. Thank you, Doctor.
according to your notes in Exhibit 5, isn't it true that Mr. Eagle was exhibiting side effects from his chemoradiation therapies?
Yes, that's common.
And according to your notes in Exhibit 5, isn't it true that Mr. Eagle's blood results still showed cancerous cells?
That is correct.
And is there any mention of blood clots in that document?
There is no mention of blood clots.
Is there any mention of remission?
There is no mention of remission.
Now, drawing your attention to the late morning of August 4th, you testified on direct that you visited the office of the medical examiner that day, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you arrived there around 12 p.m., correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing opposing counsel Exhibit 1, which has previously been administered into evidence. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Let the record reflect I'm handing the witness Exhibit 1, pages 1 and 2, 45 and 46. Now, looking at that autopsy report that you spoke about on direct, isn't it true that you did not perform this autopsy, Dr. Strike?
That's true. I did not perform.
The autopsy was performed by Dr. Raymond, correct?
Yes,
Isn't it true that you did not complete the autopsy report, Dr. Strike?
I did not complete the autopsy.
And that was also completed by Dr. Raymond, correct?
I'm sorry.
The autopsy report was also completed by Dr. Raymond, correct?
Yes, it was.
Have you ever given an autopsy before?
I have not given an autopsy before.
Isn't it true that the autopsy report states that the initial examination of Mr. Eagle was conducted on the scene?
I'm sorry. Can you ask that again?
Sure. Isn't it true that the autopsy report states, first full paragraph, third to last line, that the initial examination was conducted by Dr. Raymond on the scene?
Yes, it states that.
And you were only present for the examination conducted at the office of the medical examiner, correct?
Correct.
So you were not present for the initial examination of Mr. Eagle that was conducted on the scene, correct?
I was at the autopsy. I was present at the autopsy.
Your Honor, I ask that that response be stricken from the record as non-responsive, as the question asked whether he was present or not for the initial examination, and he responded about the medical examiner's office.
Well, the jury can observe his response and make a determination. I'm going to deny that objection.
Specifically focusing on the initial examination conducted on the scene and not the examination conducted there afterwards. Were you present for that examination?
It's cross-examination. I'll allow it.
Would you like me to repeat that question? You were not present for the initial examination of Mr. Eagle that was conducted on the scene, not at the medical examiner's office, correct?
That's correct.
Moving forward, in the autopsy report, Dr. Raymond concluded that the cause of death was a blood clot that led to a stroke, correct?
Yes, blood clot that led to a stroke.
Isn't it true that there are multiple different causes of blood clots?
There can be many different causes. Yes,
Mr. Eagle's toxicology report on the second page indicated that there were trace amounts of chemotherapy drugs that remained in Mr. Eagle's system, correct?
Correct.
And you mentioned earlier that you had been treating Mr. Eagle since his stage 2 cancer diagnosis, correct?
Yes, I've been treating him.
And your therapies at Central City Hospital focus on chemoradiation therapies at high doses, correct?
Yes,
And your therapies are intended to shock the body, correct?
yes,
To your knowledge, isn't it possible that the trace amounts of chemotherapy drugs that remained in his system were from your treatments?
yeah, he's only been seeing me, so yes, I would assume so.
According to the autopsy report, Mr. Eagle's small intestine still showed signs of advancing cancerous cells, correct?
Yes, it says that on the autopsy report.
And isn't it true that the autopsy report states that these signs of advancing cancerous cells are consistent with Mr. Eagle's stage 2 diagnosis?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Eagle was not cured of cancer then, correct?
He was not cured of cancer. His cancer just stopped growing.
But he still showed signs of advances in cancerous cells, correct?
Yes, that's what's written in the report.
Looking at the condition of the body on the first page, Mr. Eagle's body had a slight jaundice, correct?
My witness was not present for that. And asked to get him to testify about begin to testify, even though it's in the opposing counsel not there for the initial examination of the body.
Your Honor, may I respond? I only stated that he was not present for the initial examination that was conducted on the scene, not an external examination of the body.
Well, in any event, he's here, he's testified as a doctor, so I'll allow him to answer that question if he can, if he knows what it is, and if he doesn't, then he can tell us that as well.
Would you like me to repeat my question again?
Yes, please.
Looking at the section on the condition of the body on the first page, Mr. Eagle's body is stated to have had a slight jaundice, correct?
That is what is written.
And from your knowledge as a doctor and is indicated on that autopsy report, jaundice is a common side effect from chemoradiation and radiation treatments for cancer, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Meaning that Mr. Eagle was exhibiting further side effects from his chemo treatment in addition to the side effects we discussed earlier, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he had high doses of chemoradiation, so that's a common thing.
Looking next at deformities on the first page, isn't it true that Mr. Eagle had several scars on his body that matched claw marks?
Yes, that's what's written in the report.
And from your knowledge as a doctor, are you aware that when an individual gets a cut, the human body sends blood clots to the site of injury?
I guess it's possible.
Turning to the second page of the autopsy report, in the portion that addresses the internal examination, Mr. Eagle's liver contained a slight fattiness, correct?
Yes, it does say that.
According to the autopsy report, this fattiness is indicative of fatty liver, correct?
Yes, that's what it says in the report.
And the autopsy report also indicates that fatty liver is usually caused by alcohol use, correct?
That, it can be caused by chemoradiation as well.
I will repeat my question. I'm not sure if it was answered. Does the autopsy report indicate that fatty liver is usually caused by alcohol use?
Yes, that's what's written in the report.
And Mr. Eagle's stomach contents also indicated the presence of a fluid consistent with a malt beverage, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And his toxicology report was positive for alcohol with a blood stool content of 0.01 on site, correct?
Yes, that's what's written.
Isn't it true that blood stool content decreases over time?
Yes,
And according to the report, isn't it true that Mr. Eagle was dead between 1 to 3 hours before his body was found?
looking for where it says that.
It's on the first page of the report. I believe it's the first full paragraph states, or I believe there's times listed there.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure, I can break it down. I will withdraw my previous question. Mr. Eagle's time of death was between 6:30 and 8:30, correct?
Correct,
Mr. Eagle's body was found at 9:27, correct?
correct,
Meaning that Mr. Eagle's body was found approximately 1 to 3 hours after Mr. Eagle's death, correct?
yes, that's correct,
Meaning that several hours must have passed between the time that Mr. Eagle died and the time that his blood stool content was tested, correct?
1 to 3 hours.
And from your knowledge as a doctor who went to medical school, are you aware that alcohol interferes with the blood clotting process?
He works with cancer patients. He doesn't do general practice in hospitals. That's never been what he does. He has only worked in oncology at the Mayo Clinic doing cancer research with patients and treating them. He
All right, but
has,
still, if he knows, he can answer, and if that's not his specialty, then he can answer that as well.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
From your knowledge as a doctor who went to medical school, are you aware that alcohol interferes with the blood clotting process?
That's just not my specialty, so I don't want to answer that question.
Now, you testified on direct that the autopsy concludes that the cause of death is a blood clot that led to a stroke, correct?
Yes,
But isn't it true that ultimately the autopsy ruled Mr. Eagle's death inconclusive?
just show me where it says that.
The last line, I believe, of the autopsy report on the second page, isn't it true that it states the subject death is ruled inconclusive?
That's what's written in the report. Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. May I approach the witness to retrieve the exhibits?
Yes, you may. Counsel, do you need those at all?
No.
Yes, you can retrieve that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
I would like to do a very brief redirect with this witness, Your Honor.
You're more than welcome to.
Let the record reflect that at this time, I'm approaching the witness with what has already been previously entered into evidence as Exhibit 5. Your Honor, if you don't mind if I stand here with the witness just to show him specific portions on there that I would like to refer to, the jury has my second copy.
All right, just stand behind him so you're not blocking his view from. the
Yes, Your
jury.
Honor. Now, Dr. Strike, you recognize the document I just handed you, right?
Yes, this is Joe Eagle's notes from his last meeting with me.
Now, there were a lot of questions asked of you during cross-examination regarding Joe Eagle's condition and his overall health. So bringing your attention to this, I want to direct you to this second sentence. Could you please read that aloud to the jury?
Chemoradiation has ceased growth of mass. It has not decreased during the last 3-week chemo round.
And could you read the sentence that follows?
Handling side effects of chemo well.
And then if you could read this sentence right here, beginning with the word no.
No signs of organ dysfunctions.
And the sentence beginning with latest that follows.
Latest scans and tests show no concerns with muscular degeneration and healthy levels of blood flow.
Now, healthy levels of blood flow. In other terms, as you've testified to previously tonight, what is that indicative of?
He had no blood clots during these tests during this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Strike. Your Honor, I have no further questions. I just ask that Dr. Strike be relieved from the stand.
Any requests?
Yes, please, Your Honor. Dr. Strike, do you still have Exhibit 5 in front of you?
I do not.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm handing the witness Exhibit 5 once more. Could you please read the date that those visit notes were from?
These notes were taken on July 21st of 2022.
And isn't it true that the victim, Mr. Eagle, died on August 4th, 2022?
As to the date of death?
Yes, Your Honor. The redirect only focused on what is contained in Exhibit 5 specifically. The date of death is not contained in that exhibit and therefore goes beyond the scope of the redirect.
All right, well, I'll allow it. There's no dispute as to when he died, correct?
No, Your Honor, I believe he's previously testified.
I received a call on August 4th that a body had shown up to the medical examiner's office that day.
And August 4th is after the date of that visit, correct?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
August 4th is after July 21st, correct?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor. May I approach the witness to retrieve Exhibit 5?
You may. I'll have the prosecution retrieve your exhibits that the jury has, just so you keep everything in order, if you would.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, that marks the conclusion of your testimony. You may step down. Thank you very much. All right, does the government have any additional witnesses you'd like to call?
We do, Your Honor. At this time, the people call Sam Waters to the stand.
All right, Mr. Waters, come on up, Ms. Waters, come on up, be sworn.
You swear to tell the truth. What you're about to say.
Good evening, Ms. Waters. Can you please state your name for the record
Yes, it's Sam Waters.
and where you currently reside?
I live at 926 Dove Drive, Central City, New Scotland.
And could you please give us a brief explanation of your education history?
Yes, I attended New Scotland University where I obtained a master's degree in human biology.
And what experience do you have in that field?
I focus mainly with in the discipline of genetics as well as anatomy.
And how did your career begin?
When I was in my master's program of the final year, I interned with a company called True Genetics. Upon graduating, I accepted a position there as an assistant 3 research assistant.
So you mentioned True Genetics. What is True Genetics?
It's a biological researching company.
And how many employees does True Genetics have?
I'd say roughly 150.
What kind of research does True Genetics conduct?
True Genetics conducts research ranging from molecular biology to mutation.
And what subfield did you work in during your time at True Genetics?
I focus mainly in cancer, researching cancer causing cells.
And what drew you to researching cancer causing cells?
Well, I've always been intrigued with the idea of genetic change, its prospective ability to prevent cancer growth as well as future generations. Many fatal and hereditary problems are genetic.
So what did your job at True Genetics entail?
I did a lot of research. I mostly did researching on DNA sequencing, cancer causing cells. I worked with a team of doctors in a position there that researched that sort of thing.
And what kind of research did you do?
Did a lot of research on different types of topics, studies, trials. I did a lot of hands-on research as well, mostly just whatever they asked of me at the time of my employment.
So you mentioned hands-on research. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, an example, there was an occasion where my boss had asked me to go undercover and infiltrate Star Labs.
And
Sorry.
what is Star Labs?
Star Labs is another biological researching company. They're also our biggest competitor.
So why were you tasked with infiltrating Star Labs?
Well, True Genetics had received, information I'll restart. True Genetics had made progress in slowing the growth of cancer cells. However, Star Labs was strides in removing cancer-causing genomes altogether. The information we had was really just that the drug was headed by Dr. Carlisle and that there hadn't been FDA approval at the time.
Okay. What was your basis for your undercover assignment at Star Labs?
The basis of the research was just that we had received reports that they were working on a miracle drug that was to remove cancer causing cells altogether. And True Genetics was also in the same field and wanted to receive information of the same nature to help progress us in our own research.
And what was your plan to infiltrate Star Labs?
So my plan was to present myself as a recently unemployed research assistant. I was going to pretend like I had just resigned from my position at True Genetics due to creative and ethical differences, moral differences. And I drafted up a resume, a cover letter, and submitted a formal application.
And what was your reaction to your assignment?
I liked it. I thought that the information and access to our competitors' information would do wonders for our own research. I felt like access to their experiments, their research, as well as their products, some of which would just need the final push, would give our own research as well as research in this field invaluable progress.
So what happened after you applied to Star Labs?
After I applied, I went through an interview process, which consisted of 2 interviews. The final, which took place on, I believe, July 26, 2022.
And what happened during the interview process?
Well, on my second interview, I was originally supposed to meet with Dr. Carlisle, but I was given information that Dr. Carlisle, she could not make it. So I actually had an interview with Star Labs manager, Julian Albert, on the day that I was granted the second interview.
And what happened with the interview with Mr. Albert?
The interview went really well. I didn't think he suspected anything. For my reasoning of being there, he offered me a position, to which I graciously accepted, assistant 3.
What kind of works would you be doing as an assistant 3 at Star Labs?
I was going to be working on a team that was going to be doing research on cancer-causing cells, specifically conducting human trials for this drug that was being developed and headed by Dr. Carlisle.
And what else did you learn about the drug?
I learned that the drug did not have any FDA approval, however, that we were going to be conducting human trials within the month.
Okay. And what happened next?
I received word that I would be meeting with Dr. Carlisle the following week, so I signed some paperwork and reported back to True Genetics that I had been offered a job, and they were pleased.
And did you meet with Dr. Jamie Carlisle?
I did.
And what happened during that interview?
I met with Dr. Jamie Carlisle, I believe around 9:05 in the morning, and in the atrium.
And you met Dr. Carlisle at Star Labs, right?
Correct.
And where is Star Labs located?
It's also in New Scotland, also in the county of Meta.
And what happened during the meeting with Dr. Jamie Carlisle?
Dr. Carlisle showed me around the lab and gave me a tour, which ended early.
And why did that tour end early?
Dr. Carlisle informed me that there was a potential candidate coming in and that she was going to meet with him.
Do you recall what time the potential candidate was supposed to come in?
I believe around 9:30-ish earlier. I know this tour was at 9:05, so within that time period.
And what was your reaction to learning that there was a human trial candidate coming into the building?
I was surprised. I knew that they had just very recently submitted an application to the FDA. And based on my own experience, it takes several weeks to receive a response. So I knew with the time period of the application and the time period of my employment that it would be very unlikely, if not impossible, that they had received any sort of approval. So I was very surprised that there was a candidate on site so soon.
Okay. So during your tour with Dr. Carlisle, what happened?
Dr. Carlisle showed me around the lab, which was quite stunning.
And can you explain the lab to us a little bit?
Yes, the lab was very big, about 2,000 square feet. It had a lot of state-of-the-art equipment, spectrophotometer, a thermocycler, as well as an array of DNA sequencing equipment. There was also a side room, the vault, which was really just an unsecured side room that contained refrigerators, filing cabinets, computers, workstations, things of that nature.
Okay. And what happened after the tour?
Dr. Carlisle left and I was assigned to go into the vault, the side room, and get set up on one of the computers to begin working.
What happened after you got set up on one of the computers?
Well, Dr. Carlisle had left me alone in the lab, and so I took advantage of that opportunity to look through some of the paperwork and the documents as well to, receive information. That was what I was there to do.
And what happened next?
While I was rummaging around, I made my way over to the refrigerators and looked in one of them.
And how many refrigerators were in the vault?
I believe there were 3, and they were labeled A, B, and C.
And what did you do next?
I opened up refrigerator C and I observed several rows of vials, I think about 10, all different colors, and began looking at them.
What did you do after you began looking at the vials?
I pulled them out individually because the filing system of the vials was what I would describe as unorganized. And I was going to cross-reference each vial with Star Labs records to see the progress that they had been made on each of those different vials of vaccinations, drugs, etc.
And what did you find while you were going through each individual file?
I came upon a vial that was labeled Ocama-5. It was a light orange color, and I paid special attention as I thought that was the drug I had come to find in the first place.
Would you be able to recognize the vial if I could get a picture of it today?
Yes.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel a copy of Exhibit 9A, B, and C. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
It's a photograph of two different vials. One I recognize to be the Ocama-5, and the other, which I've, from my knowledge, know to be a shingles vaccination.
Okay, and were these the two vials that you saw in refrigerator C on the day of questioning?
I most certainly saw the Ocama-5 vial, and I may have seen the shingles.
Okay, and have they been altered in any way?
No, not to my knowledge.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would like to move what is previously marked as Exhibit 9A, B, and C and move it into evidence as people's 9A, B, and C.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, those are admitted.
Okay, may I publish a copy to the jury?
You may.
Dr. Carlisle, could you please show us on that exhibit which one is Ocama-5?
Sure. On my right, your guys' left, as well. The lighter orange color is going to be the Ocama-5 vial that I saw in the refrigerator.
Now, how can you tell the difference between these two vials?
Well, the vial on my left, your right, is much darker in color than the vial that I observed, the lighter color label Ocama-5 at the time that I observed it.
So what happened after this?
Well, as I was looking through the refrigerator, I heard someone come in, and so I put the vial back and quickly walked back over to my computer.
Did anyone enter the room?
Yes, Dr. Carlisle entered at that time.
What happened when she came in the room?
Well, I thought she was coming to check on me as it was my first day. However, she didn't say anything. At first, she didn't really look at me at all. She just walked over to the fridge area that I had just been in and opened one and pulled out what I believe to be the same vial that I had just put back in.
And just to clarify, which refrigerator did she open?
I believe she opened refrigerator C.
And what did the syringe look like that she had?
The syringe was filled with the orange liquid, the same, consistent with the color of the vial that I had just placed that was labeled Ocama-5.
And what happened next?
It had been quiet for some time, and she seemed very focused on what she was doing, and I was there to be nosy, so I asked her, what are you doing over there?
And did Dr. Carlisle reply to you?
Something, but I didn't really catch what was said.
And when was the next time you saw Dr. Jamie Carlisle?
After Dr. Carlisle left the lab, taking the syringe with her that she had filled up, I saw her on the news the next time. She had been arrested for poisoning a patient.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Any cross-examination? Right, you may proceed.
Good evening, Ms. Waters. My name is Allison Magnarelli, and I represent Dr. Jamie Carlisle. I will just be asking you a few questions this evening. You worked at True Genetics, correct? Yes. And you once worked at Star Labs? Yes, I did. And isn't it true that these are two competitors of each other? Yes, that's correct. Okay. And isn't it true that you went through a formal application process to obtain your job at Star Labs? Yes, I did. And isn't it true that that included an interview? Yes. Okay. And isn't it true that you did complete that interview process at Star Labs to obtain that job? Yes, I did complete both interviews. And isn't it true that you intended to obtain a job at Star Labs to go undercover and infiltrate Star Labs? Yes. And isn't it true that you only interviewed at Star Labs to scout for information? Yes, and receive employment for that equal purpose, yes. And isn't it true that you were promised a supervisory role if at True Genetics if you were able to use what you learned at Star Labs?
Yes, I was.
Objection, Your Honor.
The nature of the objection?
The relevancy as to what her completing her employment would result in her career.
All right,
May I
response.
respond? Your Honor, this goes to the bias of the witness, which is always relevant as far as the character of the witness and showing why she was motivated to obtain this job at Star Labs.
All
Your
right,
Honor, may be heard.
agreed, objection is sustained or it's overruled. You may continue.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
If you want to.
Okay. Isn't it true that you were promised a supervisory role at True Genetics if you successfully completed this plan?
Yes, I was.
And isn't it true that you weren't interested in employment at Star Labs beyond the scope of said infiltration plan?
Yes, that's correct.
And isn't it true that you wanted Star Labs to believe that you formally resigned from True Genetics?
Definitely, yes.
And isn't it true that you did not formally resign from True Genetics at the time of your application?
No, I had not resigned.
And did you ever accept that offer from Star Labs?
Yes, I did.
And you met Dr. Jamie Carlisle?
Yes, I did.
And what was your impression of her?
Thought she was very ambitious. Obviously I had heard about her and her reputation most definitely followed. I thought she was also very nice.
And moving forward to the events on July 30th, when you were in the lab with Dr. Jamie Carlisle. So at one point, Dr. Jamie Carlisle left the lab, correct?
Yes, twice. Once when she left me there and then another time when she took the syringe.
I can clarify that. When you first arrived there, there was a point where she left the lab and left you alone initially.
Yes,
And at that point, you went to the refrigerators that you saw.
after rummaging around, yes,
Okay. And isn't it true that you opened refrigerator C?
yes.
And isn't it true that you picked up vials that you found in refrigerator C?
Yes,
And isn't it true that the vials that you picked up, at least one of them was orange and liquid?
yes,
And that had a label with Ocama 5 on it, correct?
correct.
And that specific vial that had the Ocama 5 label, that came out of refrigerator C.
Yes,
And at some point, Dr. Carla came back in the lab, correct?
yes, she did.
And when you heard her come in, did you go back to a different place in the lab? Or did you remain at the refrigerators?
No, I put it back, closed the refrigerator, and I went back to my station that I had originally sat down at.
And could you kind of describe the location of where you were at that workstation?
Yes, I would say the workstation in relation to the refrigerator.
Sure.
I would say the refrigerator was diagonally off to the side of where I was sitting. Maybe that off to the side a bit in my peripheral vision.
Were there multiple workstations in the lab?
Yes,
Do you remember specifically which workstation you were at?
not specifically, but I remember the general area.
And isn't it true when you were at that workstation, you heard Dr. Carlisle kind of walk past you?
Yes, and she was always very nice, so the quietness sort of started.
And when she walked past you, did you see her at all approach the refrigerators?
Yes,
Okay. And did you by chance observe which refrigerator that she observed that she physically opened?
yes. To my knowledge and belief, she opened the refrigerator that was farthest, which would have been refrigerator C,
Do you know for sure if it was refrigerator C?
very confidently.
Okay. And how confident are you? Based on what was there anything blocking your vision?
Nothing was blocking my vision. No, it was in my peripheral vision.
It was in your peripheral vision?
Yes,
So did you have a clear shot of the refrigerator?
yes,
But you did just state that it's in your peripheral vision, so you weren't looking directly at the refrigerator, correct?
yes, I wasn't looking directly at the refrigerator in fear of being caught, having been in it. However, I had turned my body where I knew I could still see what was happening.
Okay. When you weren't looking at the refrigerator, do you remember where you were looking to kind of divert your attention to not get caught? Honestly, I don't. I was very fixated on my peripheral. I apologize.
Well, it's okay. Was there anything at the workstation? Was there a computer? Were there notebooks, anything?
There was a computer and I believe several stacks of papers.
And from your peripheral vision, did you see Dr. Carlisle pull out any samples from the refrigerator?
I saw her fill the syringe with an orange liquid.
Okay, so did she physically pull out any of the vials from the refrigerator?
I honestly can't remember.
Do you know, could you see like the label, what the label said on any of those vials that she pulled out?
Not from that distance, no, just the color.
And what color was that?
It was the same light orange color of the vial that I had looked at just before she had walked in.
Okay, so it was light in color,
Yes, a light orange color.
a light orange color, okay. And you couldn't see from where you were sitting what was written on the label though, correct?
No, I couldn't.
Okay. And do you have any other knowledge to understand what was in the contents, or just kind of based off of what you were viewing, you just couldn't tell for sure what was inside the vial?
What was inside visually or what was inside as in terms of the actual contents?
The actual contents, like the chemical combination, anything of that effect?
No, I couldn't know what was the actual contents aside from the label.
Okay, but you know that it was orange in color,
Yes.
specifically light orange in color, as you stated?
I would say yes, yes.
Okay. Did you ever complete any prior testimony regarding that day in question on July 30th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
You did, okay. Did you write a statement? Were you deposed, you recall?
Yes.
Okay, and do you recall specifically signing that statement on August 24th, 2022?
Yes.
Okay, and was that sworn in the same way that you swore today as your testimony?
Yes.
And were you informed and signed that you understood that that should include all relevant testimony to that incident in question?
Yes.
And do you also recall that you signed that it should include, should any new information relevant come up, that you should update that testimony?
Yes, I believe so. This was a while ago.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, it was August 24th, 22, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, one moment. And isn't it true, Ms. Waters, that within that statement that you signed on August 24th, 2022, that you stated that one of the first vials you picked up had an orange liquid and was labeled Ocama 5?
Yes.
Isn't it true, though, that you just stated that that vial that you picked up was light orange in color?
Yes, in comparison to all the oranges in the world. However, this was maybe more of like a burnt orange, but
So it wasn't a light orange, it was a
it
burnt
was
orange?
just orange.
It was just orange?
Yes.
Okay,
sorry.
so is it no longer your testimony to say that it was light orange?
No, it was just orange.
It was just orange?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that one point. Ms. Waters, also, I wanted to clarify one more point. So do you remember in your August 24th, 2022 statement that Dr. Carlisle, it looked like Carlisle was opening refrigerator C, but I could not be sure? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just to clarify, you were not sure which refrigerator Dr. Carlisle opened, correct?
That's correct. I couldn't be 100% sure.
And that was because it was in your peripheral vision
Yes,
and you were not looking directly at the refrigerator?
correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Ms. Waters, do you still have exhibits 9, E through C?
Yes.
Okay. And looking at I apologize, Your Honor. I do not see exhibit B here. I believe it was in the back. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Looking at exhibit 9B, what color is this here?
This is like a orange.
It's an orange color.
Yes.
Okay. Please let the record reflect that 9B is the shingles vaccine. No further questions, Your Honor.
Right, any redirect examination by the government? Yes, you may.
A brief redirect, Your Honor.
All right.
Before I begin, I would just like to point the court to stipulation 13. I would like to read it on the record. Stipulation 13 is the people in the defense agree that exhibit 9A through C represent both the shingles vaccine and Okama 5. 9B represents the shingle vaccine and 9C represents Okama 5.
Okay.
No, Ms. Waters, there was a lot of testimony and a lot of confusion about colors previously mentioned. I just kind of like to reiterate and make sure we're sure of what we saw in the day in question. So what refrigerator did you go in initially when you entered the vault?
I entered refrigerator C.
Okay, and after Dr. Carlisle came in, which refrigerator did you see her go into?
What I believe to also be refrigerator C.
Okay, and do you recall which vaccine you saw her grab from refrigerator C?
Yes, I saw her grab the same orange vaccine that I had previously put back, which was labeled Okama 5.
Okay, and on exhibit 9B and C, can you identify which one is the Okama 5?
Yes, the terracotta color is the shingles and the other vial is the Okama 5.
Okay, which exhibit on 9A, 9B or 9C is Okama?
9C.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that the witness has properly identified the Okama 5s.
Well, the record will reflect what she's testified to.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Any further recross?
Hello, Ms. Waters. Isn't it true that on redirect, you stated that you observed Dr. Carlisle pick up the same orange vaccine that you previously picked up?
Possibly, but to clarify, I more so saw her fill the syringe with the same orange vaccine that I had picked up.
So it is your testimony today that you observed her fill the syringe with the same exact liquid of the vial that you picked up?
Yes, what I believe to be the same liquid, yes.
Okay, and what is the basis of that knowledge?
It was just very similar in consistency and color.
Okay, and isn't it true that when you opened refrigerator C, you saw 10 rows of vials?
Yes,
And isn't it true that you also observed that they were all of various colors?
yes,
But you're still sure that it was the same exact vial that you saw Dr. Carlisle pick up that you previously picked up?
yes,
Okay, and going back to your affidavit that you signed on August 24th, 2022, you stated Carlisle was holding a syringe and clearly pulled out one of the samples. I looked back at my computer but tried to keep an eye on Carlisle peripherally. It looked like Carlisle was holding a syringe with orange liquid in it. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay, and you understand, as you previously testified on cross, that that you understood when you signed this affidavit to update it with any further relevant information, correct?
yes,
So is it your testimony today that what you just stated about Dr. Carlisle picking up the same vial that you picked up previously, that's relevant to this testimony?
I think I'm misunderstanding. I saw Dr. Carlisle take the syringe and fill it with the same contents of the vial that I had put back.
Correct.
Yes,
And in the statement I just read, that was not included in your affidavit. So I guess my question is, did you now feel that it's relevant to include in your affidavit rather than on August 24th, 2022, when you signed this affidavit?
yes,
I apologize. Let me recheck one moment. So
let me read the statement one more time. So it looked like Carlisle was holding a syringe with orange liquid in it. It is now your testimony today that that syringe that you saw was the same vial that you picked up from refrigerator C, correct?
Yes,
So do you now today think that that is relevant information to include in your testimony about what you witnessed on July 30th?
yes,
But it is correct that that was not included in your testimony from August 24th.
that's correct.
Okay. And you did sign the affidavit stating that you understand that you should update it if any new relevant information came up, correct?
Yes,
And you did not update the statement to the state. Yeah, correct.
correct.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, very good. As far as that marks the end of your testimony, you may step down. Thank you very much.
Honor, at this time, the people rest their case.
All right, so the people have rested their case in chief. Thank you very much. Let me ask defense counsel at this point in time, do you wish to offer any witness in defense?
Your Honor, yes, but briefly, we would like to pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 29, we would respectfully request that the court enter a judgment of acquittal now that the prosecution's case in chief has rested.
All right, basis.
We do not believe that they have met their burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt based on the evidence the witnesses presented.
All right, response.
Yes, Your Honor, the people believe that they have fully met their burden as far as it pertains to what we have to in order to move on. We have proven that on or about July 30th in the county of Meta, that this is when all of these events happened. Quite frankly, you know, Sam Waters testified to seeing the vial. Dr. Strike testified to giving the names of the candidates as well as what was contained in the autopsy report. And the rest of the remaining information from those two testimonies is a matter of fact, which is up for the jury to determine at the end of this trial. It's not a matter of procedural error.
All right, well, at this point in time, I've listened to obviously the testimony. I'm going to reserve on the defendant's motion and you may proceed with your case.
Thank you, Your Honor.